Hi everybody, it's Ryder from Hotspotting. Anyone who's followed my writings and also my broadcasts via social media will know that I have a particular view about the standard of media reporting of the housing industry. In a word, it's abysmal, and it's certainly not getting any better. A case in point has arisen this week in the Australian newspaper, our national newspaper, in the property section, where there was an article written about the Brisbane market. And according to this article, we've seen a price crash in the outer suburbs of Brisbane and a property boom in the inner city. And there's the presentation of, for want of a better word, evidence to support the headline and the introduction to that story. And I can't put it any more politely. This article is just utter garbage. Pretty much the opposite is true from what was claimed in the introduction to this article. A property boom in the inner city. In fact, we have the opposite. The inner city is plagued by the very considerable oversupply of apartments in that market, with CBD vacancies approaching 10%, and many of the near city suburbs with vacancies of 6, 7, 8% as well. The outer suburbs of Brisbane, well, most of those markets are actually doing extremely well, particularly up in the northern suburbs, and prices are rising pretty solidly. So where did they come up with the notion that there's a price crash in the outer suburbs? They talk in the introduction of 2-hour commutes. Well, I'm very familiar with the Brisbane metropolitan area, and there's nowhere within the greater Brisbane area where there's a 2-hour commute to the centre of Brisbane, 2-kilometre walk to the train station, poor roads. Quoting information and comment from a frequent source of misinformation, CoreLogic. But just to give you an illustration of how bad this article is, they illustrate the point they're trying to make about how poor life is in the outer suburbs of Brisbane by using a couple of examples. One is the suburb of Ransom, R-A-N-S-O-M-E, and they call it an outer southern suburb of Brisbane. Well, Ransom, it's not a residential suburb at all. It is a locality in the Brisbane metropolitan area, but it's not in the outer south. It's actually directly east of the Brisbane CBD, over by Moreton Bay. It's not a residential suburb, but they do quote a median price and claim that the median price for the suburb of Ransom has dropped 13%. I've done some research from our own resources, and I've discovered that in the last 12 months, how many residential sales in the so-called suburb of Ransom? Exactly 2 in the last 12 months. You can't have a median price at all in a location that's only had 2 suburbs in a year, but somehow they've come up with one and claimed that the median price has dropped 13%. Ransom, in fact, it's, as I say, not a residential suburb at all. It's mostly green space. It's got the Tinkalpa Creek Reserve. It's got a golf course. It's got a sewage treatment plants and various environmental parks. But it's not a residential suburb, so it has no part in this article at all. They also talk about what they call the suburb of Stanmore. Stanmore's not part of Brisbane at all. It's well outside the Brisbane metropolitan area. It's in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. It's not a residential suburb either. It's a rural area. It's mostly farmland. How many house sales in the locality of Stanmore in the last 12 months? 2, and in 2016 there were 3. So once again, you can't have a median price or calculations about them rising or falling when you have so few residential sales. So that's the reality for Stanmore. But according to the article in our national newspaper, the median house price for Stanmore fell 19% in the last 12 months, which they present as evidence that the outer suburbs of Brisbane, keeping in mind that Stanmore isn't part of Brisbane, are in a pretty dire state in terms of their market. Then they support the argument that the inner city suburbs of Brisbane are having a property boom, which is certainly not the case, by quoting the suburb of Yeronga, where they claim the median house price, according to CoreLogic data, has risen 33% in the last 12 months. Well, I've just looked up the latest figures from CoreLogic, and it says that in the last 12 months, the median price for Yeronga has not risen 33%, it's risen 2.9%. And in the last 3 months, it's actually fallen 1.4%. I don't know. I mean, I've seen some pretty bad articles in the Australian newspaper about real estate and in other places and other metropolitan media, but this one takes the cake. It's just appallingly bad. And keeping in mind, this is our national newspaper, purporting to present expert information and analysis of real estate markets around Australia. My advice to people, if you want to be informed about real estate, stop reading newspapers. You've got to find other better ways to be informed about real estate. Otherwise, you're just going to have your head full of misinformation and dodgy data, which abounds in Australian media. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au. Talk to you again soon.